My brothers and my sisters, lean in with me for a moment. Tonight we step into a quiet room in Kingston where an old metal drawer trembles beneath the weight of a secret that should never have been hidden. A rumor speaks of an $850 million agreement, sealed in silence, wrapped in dust, and spoken about only in the shadows. I will not claim facts that we cannot verify, yet I will walk with you through the echoes of public suspicion, community whispers, and the heavy questions that elders have asked across Jamaica and the wider diaspora. For those over 60 who have spent a lifetime watching governments rise and fall, this tale may feel painfully familiar. Something about this silence feels ancient, like a pattern you have already lived through. And somewhere in the distance, the firm stance of Captain Ibrahim Traoré presses the world to reconsider what truth and sovereignty should mean for small nations fighting to hold their dignity. My elders, stay with me. Stay through the slow rising of this storm, because before we reach the end of this night, we will touch the tremor that frightened powerful men. My brothers and my sisters, let us walk slowly into the heart of the matter. To understand why this $850 million question has shaken Jamaica, we must step backwards, breathing in the thick air of Kingston after a long season of hardship. Jamaica had endured storms, economic shocks, and a weariness that elders recognized in their bones. And in that heavy silence, a faint murmur began. Talk of a financial agreement so vast, so concealed, that even seasoned observers wondered how such a document could be signed without daylight touching it. I will not claim details that are unverified, for integrity must anchor any sermon worth hearing. Yet I will recount the atmosphere, the tone, the whispers that traveled from shopkeepers to churches, from pensioners to retired civil servants. It began, as many Caribbean revelations do, in a quiet room with too many locks, a government archive in Kingston, a file said to be misplaced, then rediscovered, a title page that raised more questions than answers. The Jamaican authorities did not confirm the full nature of the document, and community voices debated whether it was a draft, an abandoned proposal, or something active that had never been publicly acknowledged. But its mere existence, or even the rumored existence of it, stirred the island like a long-buried memory being shaken awake. The Caribbean elders, wise men and women who have watched countless administrations make difficult bargains felt something familiar rising in their chests. Many said, "This feels like 1976, or this feels like the old IMF days." Pain has a way of keeping its scent, and the elders recognized that scent immediately. For them, it was not just about money. It was about sovereignty, dignity, and the repeating patterns that often fall on the shoulders of the poorest. As the murmurs grew, retired teachers, former soldiers, and church deacons began to ask the same unsettling questions. If a deal worth that much truly existed, then who negotiated it? Who benefited? Who was left out? And how could a nation facing so many storms remain silent about a sum that could rebuild entire districts? These questions were not accusations. They were cries for clarity, born from decades of watching opaque decisions shape the lives of ordinary people. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the Burkinabe leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, was rising among conversations in the global South. The man spoke openly of transparency, sovereignty, and resisting outside pressures. African thinkers admired him. Western analysts watched him closely. His confidence, his refusal to bend, his commitment to his people, they created what many began calling an Ibrahim Traoré moment. A shift in tone that encouraged other nations to question old arrangements and demand respect on the world stage. It was this shift, this continental breeze that drifted across the Caribbean Sea. Though Captain Traoré was not involved in Jamaican affairs, his stance in Burkina Faso made Jamaicans reconsider their own expectations of leadership. Elders would sit outside small shops in Spanish Town, shaking their heads slowly, saying, "Look how that young man speaks for his people. Look how he demands clarity. Why can we not expect the same?" Even journalists, cautious and measured, sensed that something larger was unfolding. They began to ask questions on radio talk shows. They probed the history of foreign agreements. They analyzed past patterns. They invited economic experts to discuss the implications of hidden deals, whether this particular one was real, partial, proposed, or misunderstood. The landscape of public conversation was shifting, and everyone felt it. Yet the tension deepened when fragments of information, again unconfirmed, were discussed by former civil servants online. This created a storm of speculation. The Jamaican authorities' limited statements added more mystery. And every hour that passed without clarification made the public imagination expand even further. Some feared exploitation, some feared mismanagement, others feared that a national opportunity had been lost or misdirected. Whatever the truth was, the silence hit harder than the rumor itself. In the churches, pastors spoke about discernment. In small bars, men spoke about betrayal. In community halls, grandmothers spoke about déjà vu. And in the diaspora far away in New York, Miami, Toronto, and London Caribbean elders felt a familiar heaviness in their spirits. They had seen too much in their lifetime to dismiss a rumor of this size. They had buried too many lies beneath state ceremonies. They had lived through too many promises that dissolved when the cameras disappeared. And so, the island waited, watched, held its breath. A nation standing at the edge of an answer that refused to reveal itself. Jamaica was not trembling because of a number. It was trembling because of uncertainty, and because elders understood that uncertainty often hides the wounds of the powerless. But my brothers and sisters, if the island thought this was the peak of the storm, it had not yet seen the lightning. Because what came next did not only shake Jamaica, it shook its people, its leaders, and even its place in the wider world. My brothers and my sisters, when the murmurs of that mysterious $850 million question first traveled across Jamaica, there was confusion. But what followed next was something far deeper. It was not merely shock. It was not merely suspicion. It was a wave of emotion that swept across the island like a rising tide slow at first, then suddenly loud, unstoppable, and fiercely alive. The Jamaican public did not respond with a whisper. They responded with a long, trembling sigh that felt like memories returning from a place the nation had tried to forget. Elders across the Caribbean, especially those over 60 who remembered the bitter taste of old structural agreements, felt something shift in the air. This was not just about whether a document existed or did not exist. It was about a familiar feeling of being left in the dark. In Kingston, retired nurses spoke in hushed tones on their verandas. Former police officers gathered in small circles at street corners, shaking their heads slowly. Church congregations murmured after service, wondering aloud how such a rumor, true or untrue, could cause so much unease. Even young Jamaicans, usually busy with their own struggles, paused long enough to listen to the wisdom of their elders, and that wisdom was clear. When silence grows this loud, something beneath it is shaking. As concern grew, radio talk shows became battlegrounds of frustration and longing. Callers demanded transparency. Hosts pressed government officials for clarification. Analysts dissected possibility after possibility, careful not to state unverified claims, but equally unwilling to ignore the weight that was crushing public trust. A nation does not need confirmed facts to feel betrayed. It only needs patterns that resemble old wounds. And then came the night that changed everything. A popular Jamaican livestream, usually modest in viewership, suddenly exploded. Tens of thousands joined at once. Comments flashed like lightning. Caribbean elders logged in from Brooklyn, Toronto, Birmingham, and Panama City. The presenter spoke of legacy, sovereignty, and the uncomfortable echoes of past arrangements. He repeated again and again that nothing should be assumed without proof, yet he emphasized the right of a nation to demand clarity. It was during this digital gathering that another wave of emotion erupted across the diaspora. Videos began circulating of ordinary Jamaicans, market vendors, drivers, retired educators speaking candidly about their fears. Not about money, but about dignity. Jamaica deserves openness, one grandmother declared. After all we have lived through, we deserve honesty. Her words traveled far beyond Kingston, reaching African American elders who recognized the same longing for respect. That was the moment the conversation shifted from a local storm to a global awakening. African commentators referenced the bold tone coming from West Africa, where the Burkinabe Captain Ibrahim Traoré, had been challenging norms, encouraging nations to speak directly and truthfully about their affairs. Though he had nothing to do with Jamaica's internal issues, his unapologetic demand for sovereignty created a mirror. People began comparing expectations. Look how that young man behaves. Look how he stands. Why are our leaders silent? And online discussions labeled this moment rightly or wrongly as part of a growing wave of assertive leadership across the global South. It was during this time that a clip of the African leader resurfaced online, and some viewers interpreted his tone as inspirational for Jamaica's own reckoning. Commentators, bloggers, and diaspora thinkers replayed it again and again, calling it the Ibrahim Traoré reaction moment, an emotional symbol, not a statement about Jamaica, but a reflection of global frustration with secrecy. This symbolism was powerful. It lit a fire in the hearts of older Jamaicans who had witnessed decades of whispered deals and unexplained decisions. They saw in the Burkinabe captain a reminder that governments should speak boldly to their people, with no veil between them. The climax grew even sharper when a wave of small protests formed across the island, not chaotic, but mournful. People carried homemade signs, not demanding information about a specific rumored document, but demanding transparency in general. Tell us the truth. Let Jamaica breathe. No more shadow rooms. These messages echoed through Halfway Tree and downtown Kingston, as if the soil itself was remembering. Across the ocean, African American elders felt an ache in their chest. They remembered the days when their own communities demanded honesty from leaders who often turned away. They understood the Jamaican discomfort not as a foreign story, but as a familiar one. And then something unexpected happened. Smaller Caribbean nations began commenting publicly on the rising political awareness among Jamaicans. Analysts in Trinidad, Barbados, and St. Lucia broadcast segments about a Caribbean awakening. It was as if the entire region sensed a moment of reckoning, a call for dignity that transcended borders. The pressure mounted. The conversation grew louder, and Jamaica, small but mighty, found itself standing at the center of international attention. Not because the world knew the truth, but because the world saw a people refusing to be quiet. But my brothers and my sisters, if the reaction shook the island, the consequences were even more explosive. Because the morning after this great eruption, Jamaica woke to a reality that would test its unity, its leadership, and even its place on the world stage. And what happened next might be the part that elders remember longest. My brothers and my sisters, when a nation begins to ask questions that have slept for too long, consequences always follow. And in Jamaica, those consequences came like a slow drumbeat, steady, patient, and impossible to ignore. Whether the $850 million rumor was a misunderstood draft, a misplaced document, an abandoned proposal, or something deeper, the Jamaican people could no longer return to silence. The very act of questioning had opened a doorway, and once a doorway is opened, truth, whatever it may be, begins to walk toward the light. The first consequence was political. Kingston felt it before anyone else did. Retired civil servants, cautious to speak but honest in spirit, whispered about the pressure building inside government offices. Even without confirmed details, the Jamaican leadership found itself standing beneath a magnifying glass, held not by foreign observers, but by its own elders. When older Jamaicans look directly at authority, the weight of their lived experience presses harder than any headline. They have survived decades of promises, disappointments, and shifting alliances. They know the difference between reassurance and evasion. Radio hosts, normally content to discuss everyday matters, shifted into deeper territory. They asked, "If our people are worried, why is the silence so long?" Analysts spoke carefully, avoiding any claim that lacked evidence, but they dissected the broader issue: why Caribbean nations so often struggle with transparency, why agreements are seldom discussed openly, and why the public must piece together information from rumors rather than official clarity. Their restraint made the tension even heavier. The Jamaican authorities said little, and that little said even less. Then came the second consequence: economic anxiety. Merchants in Montego Bay, taxi drivers in Mandeville, fishermen along the Coast Siege Group began to worry about what might lie beneath the surface. If a financial document of that size had ever existed, what did it mean for national debt? For foreign partnerships? For long-term commitments? Again, nothing could be confirmed without official statements, yet the absence of explanation created a storm all its own. In the Caribbean, silence often behaves like a rumor. It grows. Caribbean elders, remembering days when IMF negotiations reshaped their entire lives, recognized the scent of uncertainty immediately. They spoke of past decades when unseen agreements determined food prices, fuel shortages, or social unrest. Their memories were not abstract. They were lived realities carved into the nation's history. And so, even without definitive proof of the rumored document, the anxiety felt familiar, as if the island had stepped once again into a fog where the ordinary people could see only shadows. The third consequence unfolded on the international stage. In Washington, London, and Brussels, analysts who usually ignore Caribbean affairs began issuing reports. Not about the rumored sum specifically. None would risk speculation, but about Jamaica's political climate, rising distrust, and concerns about stability. The Caribbean rarely draws headlines unless something significant is shifting, and this time the shift came not from national disaster, but from national awakening. African observers, watching from Accra, Dakar, and Johannesburg, discussed Jamaica's unrest as part of a broader movement of small nations demanding accountability. Meanwhile, African American elders, especially those over 60, felt a deep ache in their hearts as they watched events unfold. They recognized the weight of unanswered questions. They had lived through eras where truth arrived too late and cost too much. For them, Jamaica's unrest stirred memories of cities where communities demanded honesty and paid the price for daring to ask. The diaspora community, scattered across continents but united by memory, felt Jamaica's tension as if it were their own. But perhaps the most profound consequence was spiritual. In churches across the island, pastors preached sermons about truth, light, and the burden of secrecy. They did not speak about any single rumor. They spoke about the deeper hunger for dignity. Congregations nodded slowly, some with tears in their eyes. Older worshippers remembered the years when they felt voiceless, when decisions made behind closed doors shaped their children's future without ever hearing their concerns. Now, seeing the island rise with questions, they felt both sorrow and pride. The storm reached its emotional peak when community leaders across Jamaica began organizing small meetings, calm, respectful gatherings where citizens shared concerns without accusation. These meetings were not protests. They were expressions of longing. "We just want clarity," they said. "We only want to understand." Their voices were soft, but soft voices can carry further than shouts when the world is listening, and the world was listening. This moment revealed something powerful, something that no administration, no commentator, and no rumor could dismiss. Jamaica had reached a point of no return. Whether the truth was simple or complicated, the island had awakened. A door had opened in the national spirit, and it would not be closed again. Yet, my brothers and my sisters, consequences do not end with public emotion or political pressure. The largest consequences were still ahead because as Jamaica questioned its own silence, powerful nations far beyond the Caribbean were forced to rethink their own strategies. And the way the world responded next would change the entire direction of this story. My brothers and my sisters, when Jamaica's questions grew loud enough to shake the Caribbean wind, they traveled far, far beyond Kingston's shores, far beyond Portmore's markets, far beyond Montego Bay's restless evenings. The Caribbean island found itself under a spotlight it had never asked for, a spotlight cast not by its own people, but by the powerful nations that have always watched the region with a certain quiet interest. Across the ocean, in Washington, the tone shifted. Not publicly, not in loud declarations, but in the subtle ways powerful places behave when something unsettles them. Reports began circulating inside think tanks, written in the calm, polished language of those who would rather not say what they truly fear. These reports did not speak about any unconfirmed document. Instead, they focused on Jamaica's growing public unrest, its rising distrust, and the unexpected political consciousness among older citizens. When elders awaken, even superpowers pay attention. American analysts, especially those who monitor Caribbean politics, remembered all too well how quickly a whisper in the region can become a wave. They reviewed the history, the years of foreign loans, structural pressures, and the quiet expectation that small nations would stay predictable. Yet now, Jamaica, this small, vibrant island, was doing something unusual. Its people were asking questions with dignity, not chaos. And dignified questioning is the most dangerous form of dissent. It is calm, it is patient, and it cannot be dismissed as rebellion. Meanwhile, elders in the diaspora, older Black Americans who had lived through civil rights struggles and government evasions, watched the Jamaican moment with a painful familiarity. They recognized the posture of the Jamaican people, the slow rising of a community that refuses to be ignored. Many said, "We have seen this before." We know how governments respond when the ordinary folk begin to think for themselves. Their empathy created a bridge between two histories, one Caribbean, one American joined by memory. African commentators also took notice. In Accra, in Abuja, in Nairobi, broadcasters framed Jamaica's situation as part of a broader global conversation about independence and transparency. They spoke of small nations re-examining old agreements, questioning inherited systems, and demanding honesty from both their own leaders and external partners. The island's unrest became a symbol of the global South's frustration, a reminder that even nations with limited economic power could carry moral power that unsettles established orders. In European capitals, the tone was different. Western observers adopted a cautious distance, as if hoping the storm would pass without requiring them to acknowledge it. They discussed Jamaica in terms of regional stability and community sentiment, never addressing the emotional truth at the heart of the matter, that a people long accustomed to endurance had suddenly chosen expectation instead. And quietly, almost nervously, the world began to recognize that Jamaica's unrest was not just local frustration. It was part of a shift, a subtle, growing refusal among ordinary people to accept silence as an answer. A shift that mirrored changes in Africa, in parts of Asia, in Latin America. My brothers and my sisters, this global gaze did not settle the matter. It only deepened the mystery. For once the world began to watch Jamaica closely, a heavier question surfaced, one that touched the island, the diaspora, and every elder who had lived long enough to see patterns repeat. Because the true question now was not how the world saw Jamaica, but how Jamaica would choose to see itself. My brothers and my sisters, when a nation reaches a crossroads, it does not matter whether the wind is gentle or fierce, the people must still decide which way to walk. And Jamaica, shaken not by proven facts, but by unanswered questions, now stands before three possible paths. These paths are not written in stone. They are written in the spirit of the Jamaican elders, the ones who have lived long enough to recognize when a country is being invited to change. The first path is the path of awakening. The island has seen something stir within its people, especially among those over 60 who have carried both memory and burden for decades. The Jamaican elders have begun speaking with a clarity that feels ancestral, reaching back to the wisdom of earlier generations. They are saying, "We do not want chaos. We want clarity." And this simple request may become the foundation of a new political consciousness, one that rises not from anger, but from dignity. The second path stretches toward unity, not only among Jamaicans, but across the Caribbean. The region has long shared the same storms, the same debts, the same disappointments, the same resilience. And now, as citizens of neighboring islands watch Jamaica question long-standing silences, they too feel something shifting. Trinidadians, Barbadians, St. Lucians, Grenadians, they all know what it feels like to live beneath political shadows. Jamaica's questions may become the region's mirror, helping the Caribbean people see themselves more clearly than before. The third path extends far beyond the sea, reaching toward Africa and the diaspora. In recent years, African thinkers have spoken more boldly about sovereignty, transparency, and the right of small nations to stand upright. And the diaspora, especially older Black Americans, have shown a deep resonance with Jamaica's struggle, recognizing echoes of battles they themselves fought in earlier decades. The potential for a moral alliance, one built not on treaties but on shared memory, has never been stronger. Yet even with these promising paths ahead, Jamaica faces obstacles. The island will need courage to demand clarity without descending into division. It will need wisdom to interpret its past without repeating its mistakes. It will need the steady voice of its elders to prevent political storms from turning into spiritual ones. And above all, it will need patience, for transformation does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with endurance. Still, there is hope. Hope that the island will choose transparency over secrecy, community over silence, dignity over fear. Hope that the Caribbean will rediscover its voice. Hope that the diaspora will offer both counsel and compassion. Hope that Jamaica, small though it may be, will stand tall among global South nations learning to reclaim their stories. But my brothers and my sisters, the greatest question remains unanswered, not by governments, not by analysts, not by foreign observers. It is a question only the Jamaican people themselves can answer. Because the road ahead does not depend on what happened in a locked room. It depends on whether the island is ready to walk into the light together. My brothers and my sisters, as we bring this long night to a close, let us breathe together and sit with what Jamaica has shown the world. Not a confirmed document, not an official revelation, but a deeper truth hiding beneath the surface. A people who have grown tired of silence. Jamaica has reminded the Caribbean, Africa, and the wider diaspora that dignity does not begin with certainty. It begins with the courage to ask. We watched an island shake itself awake. We watched elders, those who carry memory like a sacred flame, speak with the clarity of prophets who have survived too much to be fooled again. We watched younger generations pause, listen, and recognize the wisdom standing behind them. And we watched something stir across the Atlantic, echoing the Ibrahim Traoré moment. That global feeling when ordinary people look at leadership and whisper, "We deserve better." Yet this story is not only about unrest, it is also about longing for honesty, longing for unity, longing for governance that keeps its promises in the light of day. The Jamaican people have shown that even unconfirmed whispers can ignite a national reflection when trust wears thin. They have shown that questioning is not rebellion, it is responsibility. And in the eyes of many who follow global shifts, some saw the island's rising frustration as their own quiet Ibrahim Traoré reaction, a symbol of their desire for transparency. But beyond the emotion, beyond the rumors, beyond the unanswered questions, stands something more powerful: hope. Hope that Jamaica will demand clarity without losing itself. Hope that the Caribbean will rediscover its collective voice. Hope that the diaspora, especially our older Black American family, will continue to lend wisdom, compassion, and memory. And hope that this moment, this second Ibrahim Traoré moment, will remind nations everywhere that leadership must serve the people, not hide from them. So now, my elders, I turn the question to you. What does Jamaica's awakening mean for the future of our global Black family? Do you believe transparency can be reborn? Do you believe unity across oceans is possible? Share your truth in the comments. Speak boldly. Your voice carries weight. And if this message stirred something in you, if it awakened memory or hope, then stand with us, stay with us, and subscribe so you never walk this journey alone.